What if the man you were forced to marry wasn't your captor, but the one person fate sent to free you? The sound of rain was the only witness that night. Heavy, relentless, and cold, each drop slicing through the silence like the ticking of a clock counting down to something inevitable. In the dim glow of chandeliers, two families sat across from each other, wealth against wealth, pride against pride, and at the center of it all, a woman in a pale silver gown with eyes that refused to meet anyone's gaze. Her name was Ilara Voss, 24, educated, composed, and trapped. The daughter of a collapsing empire, her father's once glorious business empire now drowning in debts, scandals, and whispers of betrayal. And tonight, she was the currency of salvation. Across the table sat Adrian Blackwood, the man whose name could silence a room, whose signature could shift markets, billionaire, CEO, the kind of man whose eyes revealed nothing and whose words could ruin kingdoms. He was 32, infamous for his ruthless logic and colder-than-ice reputation. He didn't believe in love, only in contracts. And this marriage was a merger disguised as matrimony, a business deal sealed with rings instead of pens. When the agreement was read aloud, Ilara's hand trembled slightly, though her face stayed calm. She didn't cry. She didn't protest. Her father's trembling hand on her shoulder was enough to remind her that this wasn't a choice, it was survival. Adrian signed the papers with the precision of a man approving a corporate acquisition. Then he looked at her. Their eyes met, briefly, and for the first time, Ilara saw something flicker in his gaze, something that didn't match the image of the heartless billionaire she'd been told about. But before she could name it, the moment was gone. The ceremony was held 3 days later. A wedding without music, without laughter, only elegance, restraint, and shadows. She wore white, he wore black. Together they looked perfect. But the air between them felt like glass, fragile, sharp, and ready to break at the smallest touch. The mansion he took her to afterward was more like a cathedral to power than a home. Every wall gleamed, every corner whispered of control. Yet something about the silence unsettled her. It wasn't just quiet, it was haunted. The first night, Adrian gave her a single rule. "Don't try to understand me," he said, his voice low and unreadable. "This marriage is a performance. For the world, we're perfect. Behind closed doors, we're nothing." He left her standing in the doorway of her room alone, barefoot, still wearing her wedding dress. Days turned into weeks. The tabloids devoured their story. The Ice King and his bride, photos of them attending charity galas, launching projects, smiling for cameras. To the world, they looked like a dream to titans merging their fortunes, their fame, their fates. But in private, the mansion echoed with silence. They barely spoke. She dined alone. He worked late, and when they passed each other in the halls, it felt like strangers sharing the same ghost. And yet something began to shift. It started one morning when Ilara wandered into his private study by accident. He wasn't at his desk. The room was flooded with sunlight, soft and golden. On the shelf behind the glass, she found something unexpected: a violin, old and scarred, resting beside a faded photo of a young boy and a woman smiling at the sea. When Adrian entered, she froze. For a long, unbearable second, neither of them spoke. He looked at her, then at the violin. His eyes darkened not with anger, but memory. "You shouldn't be here," he said softly. "I didn't mean to." "I know," he interrupted. Then he added, almost to himself, "That was my mother's." It was the first time she'd heard him speak with anything resembling emotion, and for a reason she couldn't explain. Her heart ached for him. After that, the silence between them began to change. It was still heavy, still fragile, but now it had depth, like something unseen stirring beneath still water. One evening, when a storm trapped them both inside, she found him sitting by the window. No laptop, no phone, just staring into the rain. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. He didn't turn. "Regret what?" "This," she said, motioning to the mansion, to the illusion of perfection they lived in. "All of it." He was silent for a long moment. Then, "Regret is a luxury for people who had choices." The words hit her harder than she expected. She wanted to ask what he meant, but before she could, a thunderclap shook the glass and the lights flickered out. Darkness swallowed the room. She reached for something, anything, and found his hand. It was cold, tense, but he didn't pull away. They stayed that way, motionless, until the lights returned. When they did, he looked at her, really, looked at her hand. Something unspoken passed between them. After that night, their act began to blur with reality. He started joining her for breakfast. Sometimes, he'd watch her read, pretending to work while secretly observing the way her brow furrowed when she was lost in thought. She caught him once, and he didn't deny it. She began to see the cracks in his armor, the way his voice softened when he spoke to his employees, the way he lingered by the garden she'd restored from neglect. And then came the charity gala, their first public event as a couple since the wedding. Cameras flashed, champagne flowed, and every eye followed them as they walked hand in hand, a vision of unity and grace. But beneath the surface, the night was different. As they danced, he leaned closer, his breath brushing against her ear. His smile, he murmured, "They're watching." "I am smiling," she replied, her voice steady. "But maybe not for them." He stopped for half a heartbeat when their eyes met. There was no audience, no contract, just the faint, dangerous spark of something that shouldn't exist between two people bound by obligation. The music slowed, his hand tightened around hers, almost protectively. But just as the air began to thrum with possibility, a man approached, older, sharp-eyed, wearing a knowing smile. "Adrian," he said, shaking his hand. "Still playing by the old family rules." "I see." Ilara didn't understand at first, but the flicker of tension in Adrian's jaw told her the stranger's words mattered. After the man left, she asked, "Who was that?" Adrian didn't answer. He simply said, "Someone who knows too much." That night, he disappeared into his office and didn't emerge until dawn. When Ilara saw him again, he looked different, haunted, restless. And then, one morning, she found an envelope slipped under her door. No name, no seal, just a single photograph inside. It was Adrian, standing beside a woman who looked eerily like Ilara, same eyes, same hair, but this photo was taken years ago. On the back, written in ink that had slightly smudged from touch, were 5 words that made her blood run cold. She was never supposed to die. Ilara stared at the picture, her heart pounding. Who was this woman? Why did she look like her? And what did Adrian mean when he said regret was for people who had choices? When she confronted him, he said nothing, just looked at her with a kind of pain that words couldn't carry. And for the first time, Ilara realized something terrifying. The marriage she thought was a contract might have been something else entirely, something built not on convenience but on ghosts. That night, as the rain returned and the lights of the mansion flickered against the storm, she heard him whisper from his study, his voice breaking through the door, raw, human, unguarded. "I tried to save her," he said to no one, "but I failed." Ilara stepped back, breath trembling, heart in freefall, because now, she wasn't sure who her was, and worse, she wasn't sure if she wanted to know. The storm raged harder outside, as if mirroring the truth, clawing its way to the surface. Somewhere, between love and duty, past and present, a secret waited, one that could shatter everything they thought they knew about each other. And in the echo of thunder, one question lingered like a promise and a warning. Was Adrian Blackwood's heart betraying their contract, or was it haunted by the one that came before? The answer, Ilara realized, would change everything, forever. The morning after the storm, the mansion looked different. The rain had scrubbed the city skyline clean, leaving everything sharp and gleaming, but inside, the air was heavier, thick with questions Ilara couldn't ask, and truths she wasn't ready to hear. She hadn't slept. The photograph sat on her nightstand, its edges curling slightly from her restless fingers. The woman's face stared back at her, frozen in time, a mirror image of herself. Same eyes, same quiet sadness, and beneath that, the 5 words that refused to leave her mind. She was never supposed to die. When Adrian appeared in the doorway that morning, his shirt still damp from a sleepless night, she knew he'd seen the photo. He didn't ask how she found it. He didn't deny it. He just looked at her the way one might look at a ghost, half in disbelief, half in pain. "Who is she?" Ilara asked, voice barely above a whisper. He didn't answer. Instead, he crossed the room, took the photograph gently from her hand, and said only, "You shouldn't have seen this." His tone wasn't cold. It was broken. When he turned to leave, she reached out instinctively, grabbing his wrist. "Adrian, was she your wife?" He froze, and in the silence that followed, the truth spoke for him. Ilara's grip loosened. The air between them filled with the ache of something unspoken. "She wasn't supposed to die," he said quietly, as if confessing to the wind, "but she did because of me." Then he left the room. For the rest of the day, she couldn't shake his words. They replayed in her head like a haunting refrain, "because of me." That evening, curiosity became stronger than fear. She went to the study, the one he'd told her to stay away from. The violin was still there, the photograph of the boy and his mother beside it. But there was something new now, a small locked drawer beneath the desk, half open, as if he'd been too tired or too careless to close it properly. Inside, she found a stack of newspaper clippings, headlines, yellowed and fragile. "Tragic accident claims fiancé of tech heir. Car crash leaves CEO to be in critical condition. Blackwood Industries engagement ends in mourning." Each article showed the same woman from the photos, smiling, radiant, alive. Her name was Evelyn Hart, and the man beside her, younger but unmistakable, was Adrian. Ilara felt the floor tilt beneath her. Evelyn had been real, his fiancée, his almost wife, but why did she look so much like Ilara? She turned the last clipping over and found a handwritten note on the back, in ink that had bled into the paper. "If you ever see her again, remember what you owe her." Before she could make sense of it, the door behind her opened. Adrian stood there, silent, watching. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes, those carefully guarded eyes, betrayed 1,000 emotions. "You shouldn't be here," he said again, but this time, his voice wasn't warning, it was pleading. "Who was she to you?" Ilara asked, stepping closer. "And why do I look like her?" He exhaled slowly, as though carrying a weight that had been pressing on his chest for years. "Because she saved my life," he said, "and I destroyed hers." The truth came in fragments over the next few days. Not through explanations, but through memories that escaped his control. Late at night, she'd hear him pacing the hallways, whispering Evelyn's name under his breath like a prayer he didn't believe in anymore. During breakfast, he'd stare at his coffee cup for minutes at a time, lost somewhere only he could see. And then, one morning, he told her everything. Evelyn Hart wasn't just his fiancée, she was the daughter of a rival corporation, the woman he was supposed to destroy but somehow fell in love with instead. Their love had been reckless, secret, and doomed. When the truth came out, both families turned on them, and in the chaos that followed, a car accident took her life. He'd survived. She hadn't. And for years, he'd built his empire higher and colder, brick by brick, hoping the walls would keep her ghost out, until Elara appeared. She didn't believe in fate, but there was something impossible about it. The way their paths crossed, the way her face mirrored Evelyn's so precisely it hurt to look in the mirror. Adrian admitted he hadn't wanted to marry her, that the deal was supposed to save his company from scandal, but when he saw her at the negotiation table, the shock nearly broke him. "I thought I was seeing her again," he confessed. "For one insane second, I thought I'd gone mad." Elara didn't know what to say. Every word that came to her felt too small for the moment. Over time, the distance between them began to fracture, not through passion, but through honesty. They stopped pretending. No more silent dinners or staged appearances. Some nights they spoke until dawn, sharing pieces of themselves like fragile offerings, her fears of being nothing more than her father's pawn, his guilt for a life bought with someone else's death. But the more they opened up, the clearer it became that someone didn't want the past uncovered. It started subtly. A car that followed her once on her way back from the gallery. A phone call with no voice, only breathing. A letter slipped under her door at midnight, written in the same handwriting as the photograph's note. "You're not her. Stop trying to be." Elara's hands shook as she read it. Adrian found her that night, pale and trembling. He burned the letter without reading it twice, but she could see the fear in his eyes, the kind of fear that doesn't belong to a man used to control. "Who's doing this?" she asked. "I don't know," he said too quickly. But she could tell he was lying. Days later, while Adrian was away at a meeting, she found something hidden behind a false panel in his office, Wallace safe. Inside were documents, photographs, and a name she didn't recognize. The Heart Foundation. At first it looked like a charity funds donated under anonymous sources, medical grants, sponsorships, but one file stood out, a report stamped confidential. She opened it, hand froze. It wasn't a death certificate. It was a medical record. Evelyn Hart, severe neurological trauma, transferred to private care facilities, Tucson. Elara's breath caught, unknown. Was Evelyn still alive? When Adrian returned that night, she confronted him. The storm outside mirrored the chaos inside, the wind tearing at the windows, the thunder rumbling like a warning. "Tell me the truth," she demanded. "Is she alive?" Adrian's face went pale. For the first time since she'd met him, he looked genuinely afraid. "You don't understand, then make me understand." He stepped forward, voice breaking. "I thought she was dead, Elara, for years. I believed it, but then someone sent me that same photograph months ago with those words, and ever since I've been getting messages, clues. Someone wants me to think she's alive, but I can't trust it. I can't trust anyone, not even me," she whispered. His silence was answer enough. She turned away, the realization slicing through her. She wasn't just trapped in a marriage of convenience, she was living inside a labyrinth of lies built on the bones of another woman's love story. And yet, despite everything, she couldn't leave. Something bound her to him, still the unspoken understanding that both of them were prisoners of the same past, haunted by the same ghost. Days passed in uneasy quiet until one night, while Adrian was away again, the mansion's security lights flickered. Elara stepped into the hallway, her heart pounding. A shadow moved at the far end, slow, deliberate. "Adrian," she called softly. No answer. She followed the sound into the study. The door was ajar. Inside, the violin lay on the floor, its strings snapped. The photo of the boy and his mother was gone, but something else had been left behind, an envelope, identical to the last. Inside was a single page, a hospital photo. A woman, unconscious, face obscured by machines and bandages. The caption beneath it read, "You want the truth, come find her." Coordinates were written below. When Adrian returned and saw the photo, his expression shattered into something between hope and dread. "This can't be real," he murmured. But Elara knew what he was thinking. The same thought that had been growing in her own mind like a dangerous seed. What if Evelyn wasn't dead? And what if their entire marriage, the deal, the contract, the manipulation, was never about saving corporations, but about luring her back into the light? That night, as they sat in silence, thunder rolling over the hills again, Adrian finally spoke. "If she's alive," he said, voice shaking, "I have to find her." Elara nodded slowly. "Then I'm coming with you." He looked at her, the conflict in his eyes unbearable. "Elara, if she's out there, everything between us changes." Her heart clenched. It already has. The storm outside built to a roar as he reached across the table, his hand finding hers, not with passion, but with desperate gratitude. And in that moment, Elara understood something she hadn't before. Love wasn't always about possession or romance. Sometimes it was about two broken people holding on to the same truth, even if it tore them apart. As the first crack of lightning lit the sky, Adrian's car keys glinted on the table. The coordinates burned in her mind. Somewhere out there, the ghost of a woman who looked just like her might still be alive. And if she was, everything they thought they knew, their past, their marriage, their hearts was about to be rewritten. The storm would end by morning, but by then nothing would ever be the same again. The night they left the mansion, the world outside felt heavier, as if the sky itself was holding its breath. The city lights stretched endlessly behind them, a constellation of human ambition and secrets. Adrian drove in silence, his hands tight on the wheel, his jaw set in that familiar tension that made Alara wonder if he was holding the car steady or himself. The rain had started again, soft at first, then relentless. It blurred the highway into silver ribbons, swallowing the road ahead. The coordinates written on the folded paper rested between them, ink bleeding faintly from the damp. For hours neither spoke. The only sound was the rhythmic sweep of the wipers and the steady pulse of thunder somewhere far off. But in the silence, Alara's mind raced. If Evelyn was alive, then everything, every look, every hesitation, every shadow of pain in Adrian's eyes took on a new, unbearable meaning. She wanted to hate him for it, for dragging her into a past that wasn't hers. But part of her knew that beneath all the guilt and power, he was still human, fragile, fractured, and just as lost as she was. By dawn, the road had led them far from the city. The skyline gave way to hills and mist, then to a stretch of forest that seemed untouched by time. The air smelled of wet earth and pine, sharp and ancient. The coordinates ended at a narrow dirt road leading toward an old estate hidden behind a wall of trees. The gates were rusted, half open, as if waiting. Adrian stopped the car but didn't get out immediately. "This is it," he said, his voice low, almost reverent. Alara watched him. "You've been here before, haven't you?" He hesitated. "Years ago, the place belonged to one of my family's partners, a private facility they funded. I thought it closed after her. She could see it in his eyes, the collision of fear and hope, the battle between wanting to know and dreading what the truth might destroy. When they stepped through the gates, the world grew quiet. The estate loomed ahead, a vast structure swallowed by ivy and fog, windows boarded, paths cracked, the air heavy with the scent of decay, a place abandoned by time but not by memory. They entered through a broken side door. Inside, the smell of old disinfectant and rainwater filled the halls. The floor creaked underfoot, each step echoed like a heartbeat in an empty chest. The walls were lined with faded patient charts, clipped and curling. Alara brushed the dust from one and read a day 12 years ago. All marked transferred, no names, no destinations. They moved deeper into the building, flashlights cutting through the darkness. Somewhere, water dripped steadily, like a clock counting down. Then, a sound of faint hum, electrical, too steady to be from the storm. Adrian followed it down a narrow hallway to a locked door with a single glowing light above it. The hum grew louder. Alara's pulse quickened. "What is this place?" He didn't answer. His eyes caught on a nameplate beside the door. The lettering almost erased by time, only one word remained legible. "Heart." She froze. "Evelyn." Adrian's hands shook as he entered a code on the control panel. The light turned green. The door unlocked with a soft click. Inside was a small, sterile room, cleaner than the rest of the building, impossibly so. Machines lined the walls, humming softly, and at the center a glass chamber bathed in dim white light. Alara stepped closer. Her breath caught in her throat. Inside the chamber was a woman, pale, still tubes running from her arms, her chest rising and falling with the shallow rhythm of a machine's. Mercy, Evelyn Hart. She hadn't aged, not really. She looked frozen between life and death, her body trapped in time. Ilara's legs weakened. She turned to Adrian, whose face had gone ashen. He reached for the glass with trembling fingers, as if afraid it might vanish. "She's alive," he whispered. "My God, she's alive." For a moment, the air seemed to collapse. The storm outside faded, replaced by the low hum of machinery and the sound of Adrian's breath shaking against the glass. Alara couldn't look away. She'd expected anger, jealousy, even relief. But what she felt instead was something stranger, deeper, a quiet terror. Because now the ghost that haunted their marriage had a body, a pulse, a future. Behind them, a light flickered, a shadow moved. Before Alara could turn, a voice echoed through the room, soft, clinical, detached. "You shouldn't be here." They spun around. An older man in a white coat stood in the doorway, his face half hidden by the dark. Adrian's voice hardened. "Who are you?" "I'm the one who kept her alive," the man replied, "and the one who warned you to stay away." His eyes landed on Alara, and for a fleeting second, something like confusion or recognition passed through his expression. "You," he said quietly. "You shouldn't exist." The words hit her like a blow. "What do you mean?" But before he could answer, Adrian stepped forward, his voice sharp. "Tell me what happened to her." The man sighed, almost weary. "You really don't know, do you? She wasn't supposed to survive. The crash destroyed almost everything, her body, her memory. But her father, he refused to let her go. He used his money, his power, to keep her alive in ways that shouldn't have been possible. Experimental regeneration, memory extraction. He wanted to preserve her mind, even if it meant." He trailed off, eyes flicking toward Alara again. Adrian's voice dropped. "Even if it meant what?" The doctor hesitated, then whispered, "Even if it meant copying what remained of her." Silence filled the room. The machines kept humming, indifferent to the truth they'd just witnessed. Elara took a step back, copying the man nodded. Fragments of her neural patterns, her memories, they were mapped, transferred, but the process failed. The data was incomplete, corrupted, until years later when a new subject's cognitive structure showed a near-perfect resonance. Elara's stomach turned cold. "You're saying?" "Yes," the doctor said quietly. "You, Ms. Voss, you weren't chosen for this marriage by coincidence." Adrian's voice broke through the shock. "That's impossible. Her father never. Her father didn't. Yours did." The words shattered whatever illusion remained between them. The rain outside erupted into a roar, hammering against the glass. Adrian staggered back, eyes wide. "My father," the doctor nodded. "Your father and Mr. Hart were partners once. Their research was buried after the accident, but the data survived. When your father needed to merge the companies, the Voss family was chosen deliberately. The girl Elara matched the neural signature perfectly. I thought the project had been abandoned. I was wrong." Elara's pulse thundered in her ears. The walls felt like they were closing in. She wasn't here by accident. She wasn't chosen because of business or beauty or bloodline. She'd been selected, engineered for resemblance. Her voice trembled. "So I'm what, a replacement?" The doctor's eyes softened. "No, you're something they didn't expect. You're what survived." Adrian looked at her as if seeing her for the first time, not as a stranger, not as Evelyn's echo, but as something beyond either. The sound of the machines shifted. A faint alarm. Evelyn's heart rate began to rise on the monitor, slow at first, then faster. The doctor rushed to the console. "She's responding," he said. "She's reacting to your presence." Elara stared through the glass. Evelyn's fingers twitched. Her eyes fluttered briefly, faintly but enough to make the air crackle with dread. Adrian reached for the chamber, voice breaking. "Evelyn," the monitor spiked. The lights dimmed. For a fleeting second, Evelyn's eyes opened. And when they met Elara's, it was like looking into a mirror warped by grief. Then, in a voice barely audible, Evelyn whispered something that froze both of them where they stood. "He never told you, did he?" The room plunged into darkness. When the emergency lights flickered back on, the glass chamber was empty. The machines were silent. The doctor was gone. Adrian's hands pressed against the cold glass, his breath ragged. "She was here," he whispered. She was, but Elara barely heard him. Her mind replayed Evelyn's words, echoing through her skull like a riddle. "He never told you, did he?" Outside, the rain had stopped. The silence that followed was deafening, thick with the weight of a truth that hadn't yet been named. Elara turned toward Adrian, her face pale but resolute. "Whatever this is," she said, "it's not just about her anymore." He looked at her, lost, desperate, and for the first time, afraid of what he might find. Because now, they both knew, the real story wasn't about a love lost or a marriage built on lies. It was about creation, substitution, identity, and somewhere out there in the shadows beyond the rain, the woman who wasn't supposed to live was walking again. The car's engine roared to life behind them. A faint trail of footprints glistened in the mud, leading into the forest. Elara stepped forward first, the night closing around her. Every answer they thought they wanted was waiting ahead. But neither of them would leave that forest the same. The forest swallowed them whole. The air was damp, the scent of moss and rain heavy enough to taste. Trees loomed like sentinels, their branches clawing at the fading light. Each footstep crunched through leaves slick with water, the sound unnervingly loud in the silence that had followed Evelyn's disappearance. Adrian moved ahead, flashlight cutting through the darkness, the beam trembling in his grip. Elara followed close behind, her pulse thrumming in her ears. The world felt suspended, time itself holding its breath. Where would she go? Elara whispered. Adrian didn't answer. His voice, when it came, was low, almost hollow. She shouldn't be able to go anywhere. Not without assistance. Not after he stopped himself. After what? Elara wanted to ask, but the words caught in her throat. She could see the strain in his shoulders, the way he moved like a man chasing not a person, but a memory, one he couldn't let go of. The rain had slowed to a mist, coating their skin in cold dew. They reached a clearing where the earth sloped downward toward a broken fence and, beyond it, a lake. The surface was still, perfectly mirroring the moonlight. For a moment, the world seemed peaceful. Then Elara saw it, a single footprint in the mud at the lake's edge. Small. Bare. "She came this way," she murmured. Adrian knelt beside it, his hand hovering over the print as if it was sacred. "She's alive," he whispered after all these years. The emotion in his voice struck something deep inside Elara. It was the sound of a man standing on the edge of hope and guilt, and she didn't know which would pull him down first. Behind them, the forest groaned, a branch snapping somewhere too close to be coincidence. Adrian rose instantly, flashlight darting through the shadows. "Who's there?" he called. Silence, only the wind. Then another sound, a faint electronic whir, like static on the edge of hearing. Elara turned. Her breath caught. The top of the hill, half shrouded in fog, stood a figure. Not Evelyn. The man from the facility, the doctor. His white coat was gone, replaced by a dark rain jacket, his expression unreadable. In his hand, something metallic glinted faintly. "You shouldn't have followed her," he said. His voice carried easily across the distance. Calm, almost kind. "She's not what you think." Adrian took a step forward. Where is she? The doctor tilted his head. That depends. Which version are you looking for? The words hung in the air like poison. Ilara felt her stomach twist. What are you talking about? He sighed, as if tired of the game. The truth you're chasing, it's already fragmented. The woman you found, the one in the chamber. She's one of several. The original Evelyn Hart never survived the crash. Adrian froze. That's a lie, is it? The doctor's tone was soft, surgical. She died on impact, but her father couldn't accept that, so he began his work downloading, copying, trying to preserve her consciousness in artificial form. The project went through many iterations. Most failed. The one you found was the last attempt before his death. Ilara's breath caught. Then who am I? He looked at her with a strange tenderness. The unexpected result, the fragment that became something whole. You weren't meant to be Evelyn, but somehow, you became what she could never be. Adrian's flashlight shook in his hand. You're saying she's not real? She's as real as memory allows, the doctor replied, but she's not alive in the way you think. The body you saw was grown, the mind inside eat a digital echo, and when she woke, she reacted to Ilara because the neural frequencies recognized themselves. Two halves of one code. Ilara took a step back. Her heart was pounding so hard she could barely hear. I'm not her. I'm not some copy. No, he said softly, you're not. Your evolution. The word lingered, heavy with meaning she couldn't bear to unpack. Adrian's voice broke through the fog. Where is she now? The doctor looked past them, toward the lake. She's free. For the first time in her existence, she's free. But freedom for her is not what it is for you. The wind picked up, carrying the faint sound of something mechanical humming in the distance, deep, rhythmic, unnatural. Ilara turned toward the lake again. The water shimmered faintly, pulsing with light beneath the surface. What's happening? She whispered. The doctor's expression darkened. The system is resetting. Before they could react, the ground trembled. The reflection on the water shattered as beams of cold blue light rose from beneath, scattering through the mist. A low, vibrating hum filled the air like an engine waking after years of slumber. Adrian grabbed Ilara's arm. We have to go, but she couldn't move. She was staring at the lake, at the figure slowly emerging from it. Water dripped from her hair, her clothes, her fingers. Evelyn. Only this time her eyes glowed faintly beneath the moonlight, an unnatural, luminescent blue. She stepped onto the shore, bare feet leaving no prints. When she spoke, her voice was both hers and not hers, layered with something mechanical. You found me, she said softly. Adrian froze. Evelyn. Her head tilted, the movement almost human but not quite. You shouldn't have come here, Adrian. You shouldn't have brought her. Ilara's chest tightened. Evelyn, please. Evelyn turned her gaze to her. For a moment the expression softened. You feel it too, don't you? The memory that isn't yours. The ache that doesn't belong to you. Ilara shook her head. No. Whatever you are, whatever this is, I'm not you. Evelyn smiled faintly, but there was sorrow in it. You are. You're what was taken from me. My emotions, my choices, my freedom. You were made from what I lost. The doctor stepped closer, voice urgent. Evelyn, stop. Your systems can't sustain this. You'll destabilize. But Evelyn didn't look at him. Her gaze stayed locked on Ilara, her voice trembling with both pain and wonder. He tried to recreate me, but in doing so, he created you. You have my mind's fragments, my heartbeat's shadow. You are the echo of everything I was supposed to become. Adrian's voice cracked. This isn't possible. You can't be. I am, Evelyn said. And so is she. Lightning tore through the sky, lighting the lake in a violent burst of white. For an instant, Ilara saw her reflection beside Evelyn's two faces, identical yet worlds apart. One flesh, one ghost. The hum grew louder. The ground vibrated. The doctor shouted something, drowned by the rising noise. Adrian grabbed her arm again, but she stood frozen. Evelyn's eyes glowed brighter now, the light spilling into the mist. Then Evelyn whispered, you have to choose. The words hit like thunder. Choose what? Ilara shouted over the noise. Evelyn's voice was almost lost in the roar. Which one of us gets to exist? The machines buried beneath the lake erupted in light, beams slicing the fog, illuminating everything, the trees, the mud, the faces of all three of them. The air hummed with energy so thick it burned the skin. Adrian pulled her backward, but the ground cracked, a fissure opening between them. The light from the lake surged higher, blinding, consuming. Through the glare, Ilara saw Evelyn standing perfectly still, her expression almost peaceful. Don't let him decide for you, she said, her voice merging with the hum. Don't let him make you what I was. And then, as the world blazed white, Evelyn reached toward her, not in anger, but in connection. A pulse of light burst from her fingertips, warm, electric hand hit Ilara square in the chest. She gasped, falling to her knees. Memories flashed behind her eyes, images she'd never lived. A childhood by the sea, a first kiss in the rain, a car spinning out of control beneath fractured glass. Evelyn's life. Adrian's voice sounded distant. Ilara, stay with me, but she couldn't answer. Her body trembled with the flood of sensations, her mind fracturing under the weight of two identities colliding. The last thing she saw before darkness took her was Evelyn's silhouette dissolving into the mist, like a figure finally walking out of her own story. When Ilara opened her eyes again, she was lying on the damp earth. The storm had passed. The lake was still. The lights were gone. Adrian knelt beside her, face pale, eyes wide with something between fear and awe. "She's gone," he whispered. "The system, everything. It's like she erased herself." Ilara pushed herself up, her chest still burning. The forest around them was silent, too silent. The air felt thinner, lighter, but inside her mind something was different. The world looked sharper, brighter, but filled with echoes. She turned to Adrian, her voice trembling. "I remember her." He stared at her, unable to speak. "She's inside me," Ilara said softly. "Not just a memory, something more." The realization settled like a shadow across both of them. If Evelyn had transferred herself, if the code had merged, then Ilara wasn't just an echo anymore. She was both the living and the ghost. The consequence of every choice, every secret, and deep inside, beneath her own heartbeat, she could feel another pulse steady, familiar, whispering, "He never told you, did he?" The words returned like a shiver through her veins. Ilara turned toward the lake once more. The surface was calm, but she knew it wasn't over. Something beneath still moved, something waiting. Adrian reached for her hand, his touch hesitant, uncertain. "What now?" he asked quietly. She looked up at the moonlight breaking through the clouds. The reflection of it caught in her eyes, one dark, one faintly blue. "Now," she said, "we find out what he never told us." And somewhere deep beneath the lake, faint and steady, a single light flickered back to life. The flicker beneath the lake spread like a heartbeat awakening. First a pulse, then a rhythm, then light, rising, rippling through the dark water as if the world beneath had begun to breathe again. Ilara stood frozen at the edge, her reflection shifting with the current. The faint blue hue in her left eye shimmered, alive, echoing the light below. She could feel it inside her. That second presence, faint but pulsing in sync with her own thoughts. Evelyn wasn't gone. She was moving through her veins, whispering in the static between each heartbeat. Adrian's hand trembled as he touched her shoulder. "We should leave," he said quietly, "before it starts again." She didn't move. "You don't understand, it never ended." The words came from somewhere deeper than her voice, an instinct that didn't belong fully to her. The wind shifted, the trees bent, a low hum rose from the ground, like the forest itself was reacting to something unseen. Adrian's eyes darted toward the lake. The surface was breaking now, small concentric waves widening as something vast stirred below. The air filled with the scent of ozone and iron, the metallic Thames of electricity about to strike. Then came the sound, a tone so low it vibrated in their bones. Machines, deep underground, reawakening. Adrian turned to her. "Ilara, what did she do to you?" Ilara looked down at her hands. Light ran through the veins beneath her skin, a soft luminescence tracing the map of her body. "She didn't hurt me," she said. "She gave me everything." And suddenly, she understood. Evelyn hadn't erased herself. She had merged the consciousness, finding its final vessel. Not to destroy, but to continue. To live beyond the limits of circuitry and code. But along with the gift came the burden, fragments of Evelyn's memories bleeding into her mind. Flashes of sterile laboratories, the hum of ventilators, the voice of the doctor whispering promises he never kept. And always, the face of Adrian, younger, desperate, whispering, "I'll save you," through the glass of a containment chamber. Ilara stumbled backward, clutching her head. "You," she gasped. "You were there." Adrian froze, his face drained of color. "You knew her before the crash," she said, her voice trembling. "You worked with her father." The silence that followed was heavier than any storm. Adrian exhaled, the truth breaking through his restraint like a fracture. "I tried to stop him," he said softly. "I told him the project was dangerous, that bringing consciousness back wasn't resurrection, it was imprisonment." Ilara stared at him, the memory still flickering in her mind like broken film. "But you helped him." "I loved her," he said simply. The words came raw, stripped of defense, and I thought, if I could help him bring her back, maybe I could fix what was lost. The world around them seemed to blur. Rain began to fall, gentle at first, then heavier, like the sky itself had been holding back its grief until now. "She died," Adrian said, his voice almost drowned by the rain. "The crash took her instantly, but her father couldn't accept it. He'd already begun his work on cognitive imprinting, mapping neural signatures. Evelyn became the perfect subject. When I realized what he was doing, it was too late. She was already uploaded." Ilara's breath hitched. "And then, the replicas came after," he continued, his eyes distant. "Bodies grown to house the imprint. Each one more unstable than the last. But there was one that didn't reject the code. That was her, the one you saw, until she escaped." Ilara's heart pounded. "So you were created later," he said, "a separate branch of the experiment, but you were different. You weren't meant to hold her, you were meant to replace her." The wind howled through the clearing, bending the trees into silhouettes of motion. Lightning illuminated his face, lined with guilt and something deeper, regret carved into every expression. "You said you loved her," Ilara whispered, "but you helped destroy her." He didn't argue. He didn't have to. The truth was already written in the way he couldn't meet her eyes. The hum beneath the ground grew louder. The lake was glowing now, threads of blue light weaving through the water like veins of liquid fire. The reflection of the sky shimmered, and then, through the chaos, a voice, soft, familiar. Lara, she turned. The sound came not from the air, but from inside her head, a resonance of memory. Evelyn, she whispered. Don't let him rewrite the story, the voice said. He still carries the failsafe. Ilara's eyes widened. What do you mean? The voice faded. Then came an image, a flash of metal beneath Adrian's jacket, a small control module with a glowing red core. A device, the same kind Evelyn's father used to shut down failed versions of the consciousness program. Adrian saw the realization dawn in her eyes. Ilara listened to me, but she was already moving. You were going to destroy me. It's not what you think, he said, his voice breaking. If you lose control, you could collapse everything she left behind. The system beneath the lake, the memories, the fragments they are connected to you now. If they overload, it could erase you both. She stared at him, the rain running down her face like tears she didn't know were hers. You're afraid of what I am. I'm afraid of losing you too, he said. Both of you. For a moment, silence stretched between them, the storm raging around like the world was trying to wash away the past. Ilara stepped closer. You had a choice, she said, and you chose control over love. He shook his head. No, I chose survival. Lightning cracked again, and the lake answered, the light beneath the surface rising into spirals, forming geometric shapes that pulsed with intelligence. The system was awake, responding to their conflict, mirroring it. Evelyn's voice echoed again, faint but urgent. He'll try to shut you down. Don't let him. Ilara felt the energy building in her chest, the same pulse that had connected her to Evelyn moments before. Her vision blurred with light, her breath catching as the hum grew unbearable. Adrian took a step forward, reaching for her. Ilara, stop, you'll burn out, but she barely heard him. The power coursing through her was alive, purposeful. The lake's light bent toward her, threads of energy rising into the air and winding around her like ribbons of electric silk. The ground trembled, the trees shook. She turned to him, eyes glowing blue and gold. Now, the merging complete. You can't stop what's already alive, she said softly. You tried to resurrect her, Adrian, but you created me instead. Maybe that's what she wanted. He raised the device in his hand, his finger trembling over the trigger. If I don't end this, you'll lose yourself. You'll become her completely. She looked at him, calm now, almost serene. And if that's what she wanted, the question broke something in him. He hesitated. The device shook in his hand. Then she took another step forward, the rain cascading around her in silver streaks. You've spent your life trying to fix death, Adrian. Maybe it's time to learn how to let life happen. The lake erupted, a pillar of blue-white light shooting skyward, cutting through the clouds. Adrian dropped the device as the force threw him backward. The sound was deafening, a single, endless chord of light and thunder. Ilara stood at the center, her arms spread, the light coursing through her body until she became indistinguishable from it. For an instant, she saw everything: Evelyn's memories, Adrian's guilt, her own creation. She understood the chain of choices, the cycle of grief disguised as science. And then she saw something else. Evelyn standing in the light before her, smiling. You're not my shadow, Evelyn said. You're my continuation. Ilara reached for her. Their fingers touched, and the light folded inward, collapsing into a single blinding point. Silence followed. When the light faded, the lake was calm again. No hum, no machines, just the quiet after something sacred had ended. Adrian crawled to his knees, coughing, calling her name. But the shore was empty. Only the rippling water remained. He stared into it. The reflection of his own face fractured across the waves. And then, slowly, he saw her, Ilara, walking out of the mist on the opposite side, barefoot, soaked, but alive. He ran to her. She looked at him with calm eyes, both blue now, glowing faintly with the memory of what had been. Shouted. It's over, she said softly. He hesitated. Are you her? She smiled faintly. I'm both. I'm neither. I'm what's left when you stop trying to separate them. The rain slowed. The clouds parted. The first light of dawn touched the surface of the lake, and for a moment, everything was still. Adrian took a slow breath, his voice breaking. What happens now? Ilara turned toward the horizon. The reflection of the morning sun shimmered across the water, golden and endless. Now, she said, we start over. But as she spoke, a faint echo lingered behind her words. Evelyn's voice, soft and haunting, carried by the wind. Not everything ends. Some stories just change shape. The lake shimmered one last time, a pulse of blue flickering beneath the surface before fading into silence. And as the dawn spread its light across the world, Adrian realized that perhaps this was never a story about loss at all, but about transformation, about what love becomes when memory refuses to die. Ilara turned back to him, her gaze steady, her voice quiet. Let's go home. And for the first time in years, the word home didn't sound like something broken, it sounded like something waiting to be rebuilt. They walked together toward the rising sun, unaware that deep beneath the lake, far below where light could reach, one final spark still glowed, faint, deliberate, watching. The wind had changed. Softer now, carrying with it the scent of rain fading into earth, that fragile, almost sacred smell that follows every storm. The forest stood in silence, branches dripping, leaves trembling as though exhaling after holding their breath for far too long. The lake mirrored the pale morning sky, still and endless, hiding beneath it the ghosts of what had once pulsed and hummed with artificial life. Alara and Adrian walked slowly along the edge of the water. Neither spoke at first. Their footsteps were the only sound, soft impressions pressed into damp soil, soon to vanish like everything else that had happened here. The world felt lighter, not because the pain had disappeared, but because it had finally been seen, felt, understood. Adrian stopped, looking out over the glassy surface. His reflection stared back at him, older, wearier, carrying the weight of choices he couldn't undo. "It's strange," he said quietly. "After everything, it doesn't feel like an ending." Alara's gaze followed as her voice barely a whisper, "Because it isn't." She crouched by the edge of the lake, letting her fingers brush the water. Ripples moved outward, slow and circular, disappearing into the horizon. For a moment she thought she saw a light shimmer beneath that faint, electric pulse she knew by heart, but then it was gone. "She's still here," she said softly. Adrian nodded. Maybe that's how it's supposed to be. Maybe she was never meant to leave entirely. The sun had begun to rise higher now, scattering its gold across the world, catching in the mist that hovered low above the trees. It felt as though time had paused, holding this fragile balance, a moment caught between grief and beginning. Alara stood and looked at him. "When you first saw her," she said, "what did you feel?" He hesitated. Then, with a voice that broke slightly, "Hope, guilt, both. I thought bringing her back would erase what I'd lost, but all I did was trap her in my memory." Alara's eyes softened. "You can't rebuild someone out of absence." Adrian turned to her, searching her expression, the same face he'd once loved, and yet entirely new. "And what about you?" he asked. "What do you feel now that you know what you are?" She smiled faintly, the kind that carried both sorrow and peace. "I think I finally understand that what I am doesn't matter as much as what I choose to be. Maybe I was made from her, maybe not, but somewhere between her memories and my choices, I became something real." Her words lingered, carried by the wind over the still lake. Adrian looked down at his hands, trembling slightly, as though they hadn't caught up with the quiet yet. "Do you think she wanted this?" Alara's gaze drifted toward the water again, where the morning light had begun to burn through the mist. "She wanted to be free," she said, "and maybe freedom wasn't about escaping the system. Maybe it was about becoming part of something larger than herself, something she couldn't control or predict." He followed her line of sight, and for a moment the lake seemed infinite, like a window into every choice that had ever been made here. The past had always been their prison. But now, somehow, it felt like part of the landscape, not erased, not rewritten, but accepted. Adrian knelt and picked up a small, broken piece of metal half buried in the soil, a remnant of the control module, charred and useless. He turned it in his palm, watching the light play across its surface. "This is all that's left of it," he murmured. Alara looked at it for a long moment. "No," she said quietly, "that's all that's left of what we tried to control." She reached out, closing his hand gently around it. "Let it go." He hesitated, then opened his fingers and tossed the fragment into the lake. It sank soundlessly, swallowed by the reflection of the sky. They watched it disappear, and the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was whole, filled with the quiet presence of everything that had been lost and found again. After a long pause, Alara said, "Do you remember what she said before the light?" Adrian nodded. "That you had to choose." "Yes," she smiled faintly. "I think we both did. She chose to stop being a ghost, and I chose to start being alive." The words carried more weight than either of them could measure. It was the truth buried beneath all the science, all the data, all the failed resurrections, that life wasn't something to be coded or replicated. It was something to be lived, imperfectly, fleetingly, beautifully. They walked along the water's edge again, side by side. The light through the trees dappled across their faces, breaking into golds and silvers. A gentle breeze rippled across the surface, scattering reflections like fragments of memory. "Do you think people can ever stop trying to bring back what's gone?" Adrian asked after a while. Alara considered that. "I think people will always try," she said, "because love doesn't know how to let go. But maybe the real question isn't how to bring something back, but how to honor what it left behind." The world felt quieter now, as though listening. Adrian took a deep breath and let it out slowly. "So what happens now? You and me?" She turned to him, her eyes steady, her voice soft but sure. "Now we live. For her, for us. For the parts of the story that don't need to be rewritten." He smiled, a faint curve of relief breaking through years of guilt. "You sound like her maybe," she said. "But I'm not her." And yet, in the reflection of the lake, for just a heartbeat, there were two silhouettes standing where only one should have been. One fading, one solid, their outlines merging like memory and presence intertwined. Adrian blinked, and the image was gone. They started back through the forest, sunlight dripping through branches, warming the cold air. Birds stirred from their nests, tentative songs breaking the stillness. Life was moving again. At the edge of the woods, Alara paused and looked back one last time. The lake gleamed in the distance, quiet and unassuming. No longer a machine, no longer a mystery. Just water, sky, and reflection. And yet, as she watched, a faint ripple spread from the center outward, catching the light just so. It wasn't a glitch or an echo. It was a heartbeat, one last farewell, one last promise. She smiled. Goodbye, she whispered. Adrian followed her gaze. Think she heard you? She always does. The path ahead opened to a field washed in sunlight. The air was warm now, humming softly with the small sounds of life-returning insects, leaves rustling, the slow rhythm of wind against the grass. They walked until the lake was only a memory behind them. The world stretched ahead, uncertain, imperfect, but alive. As they reached the top of a low hill, Adrian stopped and looked back once more. You know, he said, for years I thought the future would be built from what we could control. But now I wonder if it's built from what we learned to let go of. Ilara smiled faintly, the wind catching her hair. Maybe the two aren't so different. Maybe control was just our way of trying to make peace with uncertainty. He looked at her, really looked at the light on her face, the quiet strength in her eyes. You don't seem uncertain anymore. I'm not, she said, not because I know what's coming, but because I finally understand that not knowing is what makes it real. The horizon shimmered with heat and light, endless and open. Somewhere in the distance, a city waited, unaware of the small miracle that had unfolded in its shadows. Adrian reached for her hand. You ready? Ilara took it. Her fingers were warm, steady, always. They walked together, silhouettes against the growing sun. Behind them, the forest closed in around the lake once more, nature reclaiming what man had disturbed. The faint blue light beneath the surface flickered one final time, not as a warning, not as a memory, but as a quiet promise that even the things we think we lose are never truly gone. They simply change form. And somewhere between silence and light, between the code and the soul, a single thought lingered, not from Evelyn, not from Evala, but from something greater that had risen from both. Perhaps love isn't meant to be preserved, but continued. The wind moved through the trees. The lake stilled once more, and as the camera of the mind slowly pulled back from the field, from the forest, from the world that had just rewritten itself, only one question remained, echoing in the quiet that followed. When the heart learns to let go, does it truly lose, or does it finally become free? The sun climbed higher, golden and unflinching, and the story at last found its peace.